Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another episode of Donnie Graham Builds. On today's episode, we're going to be tackling these shutters, this flower box, and this custom address block. Let's get to work.
So first things first, let's look at materials. We're going to be making all these items out of red cedar. And now that we're home, it's time to unload.
Okay, so let's talk cedar. Cedar is a great wood choice for any kind of outdoor project, shutters, picnic table, you name it. It holds up really well against water, against dirt. It's just very rot resistant. We're still gonna put a finish coat on this, but even without it, it would probably do pretty well. When you buy cedar from the big box stores, it's gonna come with two sides. A rough side that's got a lot of raised wood fibers, and then a smooth side that's already been sanded down. We want two smooth sides. Normally this would take a lot of sanding, but we got a thickness planer. So we're gonna put that to work and get these all smoothed out.
And now that everything's smooth, we can take a look at which boards are going to look best next to each other. With everything where we want it, we can start working on our joinery. I'm using my domino to connect these, but you could also use dowels or biscuits. They'd work in the exact same way. Also, when you're gluing up panels and you wipe off the excess glue, make sure you use water too. Don't be an airhead like me, because then you end up with junk like that. It just takes so much more sanding. However, after some due diligence, we came out with some pretty nice looking cedar panels. Now we can start getting things cut to length. A quick point here, the length and width of your shutters is totally subjective. I chose to go with 3 1x6s, giving me an overall width of about 17 to 18 inches. Now, as for the cross pieces that complete this classic wooden shutter look, I chose to go 7 inches down from either end. This number is entirely arbitrary. 7 happens to be my favorite number, but just kind of go with what looks good and you can't really go wrong here. Attaching these is pretty straightforward. These aren't structural, they're just decorative. So a good healthy amount of Titebond 3, which is a waterproof wood glue, some clamping pressure to hold everything together, and then I ended up flipping these upside down to drive the brad nails in from the back side. That way we can minimize the number of holes that were on the front side. Oh, and I did intentionally cut these oversized, that way I could double back and flush trim them to fit. Always better to have more than you need and cut it exact than to try to hit it exact and end up coming up short. After all the sanding I did already, I didn't want to sand anymore, but I did want to soften up the look, so I just grabbed my trim router and a 1/2 inch roundover bit and ran over those cross pieces. With the shutters pretty well taken care of, I could turn my attention to the flower box. I got all these clamped together so I could cut them at the same time and make them the exact same length. And construction was pretty simple here. All I did was glue and pin things into place and then follow those up with some countersunk screws that we're later going to cover up with trim. Now, these are actually not my first flower boxes that I've made. Previously when I made them, I made the mistake of doing end grain to long grain glue joint, and it was just not very strong, and the as the flower box would support the weight of soil and flowers and water, it would start to pull apart. So this time I made sure to go long grain to long grain on the glue up, did brad nails, and then countersink screws to give it a lot of support. To that same end, this is an 80-inch long flower box, which means the middle of it is going to be handling quite a bit of load. So I added 2 additional support blocks, splitting the box into thirds. As you can see a little bit here in this clip, I did use pocket hole screws on those end caps just because they have that pen head top and that pulls the lumber really tight together. I thought it would give a better hold. I just made sure to bore those down to where they were below the surface, and then I covered them up with this trim, which hid the screws and also made the box look a lot nicer. And on to what's arguably the biggest showstopper of this project, the address block. I picked these numbers up from my local Menards. Actually, if you're in the market for an address block, you can go to Menards and check out with the code DonnieGrahamBuilds, and nothing will happen because that's not a thing. But these were only about $5 a piece, and they really added an awesome modern flair to this finish. I mean, come on, check those out. Then just using one of the offcuts from the shutters, I could get these numbers positioned in the correct orientation and start marking out to pre-drill the holes to sink these guys in place. Also, off camera, I made a quick frame for this address block, painted it white, and then got that connected. Once connected, covered it in blue tape so I could start to apply finish. And my goodness, would you look at that cedar pop. Later that day, once everything was dry, I could take the painter's tape off and start driving these guys home using just a little bit of gentle persuasion. If you do decide to use these numbers, be careful with those little pins. They're a little on the delicate side, and I may or may not have broken a couple. Yeah, and at this point we're really just applying finish. Everything was going really well until right about, wait for it, right there. Boom, huge bummer. But before you know it, we were at the site and ready to install. Now, installation for the shutters was actually pretty straightforward. I used 6 trim head screws on each shutter and used this all-purpose silicone caulk to help waterproof the hole that would be going through the shutter, through the siding, and into the sub wall there. Then after numerous double checking, we could get those secured in and attached. Shout out to my brother-in-law Andy for the extra hand. As for the flower box, I went inside and marked where the stud locations were with blue tape and then ran that blue tape up to the window. That way I could make sure that the flower box itself was lag bolted into the studs of the house and not just the sub wall. Then after adding this plastic soil barrier, I drilled a bunch of relief holes for drainage. Admittedly, I'm not really sure what happened to the footage of me hanging the address block, but it was just a couple of screws. However, to get the flower box installed, we just pre-drilled through the siding and the subwall into the studs and lag bolted everything into place. Even bought the boss over, and she totally approved. And now, we're ready for that B-roll.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and following along. If there's something you would have done differently, leave a comment down below. I'm always open to learning new options and finding better ways to do things. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really, really helps the channel. And if you really liked it, share it with your friends. Until next time, get out there and tackle your own project. Just because you run into difficulties doesn't mean we can't get it done. See you guys.